I can't have my brother's birthday party happening while I'm this upset. Those words hit me like a punch in the gut the morning before what was supposed to be my 18th birthday. My sister, Madison, had been the golden child of our family for as long as I could remember, and somehow, even at 24, she still acted like the world revolved around her. I'm Ethan, by the way 20 now, male. Living proof that being responsible doesn't always mean you get the recognition you deserve. But 2 years ago, I was on the verge of adulthood, full of hope, and completely blindsided by the chaos that had been brewing in our Arizona household for years. Growing up in Scottsdale, my dad, Richard, ran a moderately successful construction company building custom homes in gated neighborhoods. Mum, Karen, worked as a top-tier real estate agent selling luxury properties to tech executives and retirees. Together, they made around $220,000 a year, enough to give both of us a comfortable life. And yet, comfort and fairness were luxuries reserved for Madison. From a young age, she discovered that tears, tantrums, and dramatic displays got her everything she wanted. We're not talking cute childhood fussing, these were full-blown adult meltdowns that could turn heads in restaurants and make strangers uncomfortable by the time I hit my teenage years. The disparity between us was impossible to ignore. Madison's 16th birthday brought a brand new BMW in metallic white with custom rims, while I inherited Dad's old work truck with rusted panels, 200,000 miles, and a radio that only picked up AM stations. She received a $3,500 monthly allowance while I worked 25 hours a week at the local gym just to cover gas, school supplies, and the occasional night out. When she redecorated her room for the 3rd time in 2 years, Mum and Dad spent $8,000 on boutique furniture. When I asked for help buying textbooks for AP classes, I was told to manage finances responsibly. She traveled to Europe with her sorority sisters with zero out-of-pocket cost. I spent months saving for a $400 leadership camp. It wasn't just the gifts or money. It was the invisible labor. While Madison partied, skipped classes, and treated college like an extended vacation, I kept our household together. I maintained a 4.2 GPA, worked part-time, volunteered at the animal shelter, tutored younger students, and handled most of the domestic duties. I paid the water bill, picked up Dad's dry cleaning when his back flared, managed grocery shopping, planned meals, and cleaned up after Madison's messes. Every time Madison failed or stumbled, I became the buffer, the mediator, the invisible backbone of our home. Yet whenever I succeeded, it was expected, and never celebrated. By the time I turned 18, I had hoped for a moment of acknowledgement. A small party, nothing extravagant, just friends, family, music, burgers on the grill. I even offered to chip in with my savings. Mum and Dad seemed supportive at first. Dad joked about renting an inflatable obstacle course. Invitations went out, playlists curated, the cake ordered. I felt like maybe this time, my efforts, my sacrifices, my existence would be seen. Then 3 days before the party, Madison's spring break trip to Miami got cancelled. A luxury week-long getaway with her sorority friends evaporated due to some drama I barely understood. She came home in full meltdown mode, screaming and crying, slamming doors. My parents immediately fell into crisis mode. Mum called in sick, cancelling client meetings. Dad ditched his weekend golf plans. Bubble baths, Thai food, emergency therapy sessions, the works. And then Madison dropped the bomb. I can't have a party tomorrow. It'll trigger my anxiety. I need calm and peace to process my feelings. I froze. My carefully planned celebration, the one milestone I had looked forward to for years, was being cancelled for the sake of her emotional fragility. Mom and Dad, without hesitation, sided with her. "Son, your sister needs us. You're strong enough to handle disappointment," Dad said. That was it. My birthday, my 18 years of life, my achievements swept aside. I spent the rest of the day cancelling with friends, lying about being sick, and enduring the quiet humiliation of invisibility while Madison lounged by the pool, posting melancholy selfies as if the world had wronged her that night. Alone in my room, a cold clarity settled over me. I was officially an adult. I had money saved, acceptance into Arizona State with scholarships, and friends and mentors who genuinely valued me. And for the first time, I realized I had options. I could leave. I could live for myself. And I could finally watch what happened to the family that had spent 18 years taking me for granted. The next morning, I woke up on my actual 18th birthday to a house that felt as cold and empty as it had for years. Only now it had a sharp edge of betrayal. There were no balloons, no breakfast, no happy birthday, Ethan. Mum was busy blending Madison's organic smoothie with some expensive superfood powder, and Dad had already left for the construction site, treating the day as if nothing significant had happened. And there was Madison, lounging on the couch in silk pajamas, scrolling through her phone, eyes puffy from the previous day's drama, sighing theatrically. "You're so moody this morning," she said casually. "Not my fault your party got cancelled." I could barely look at her. My entire adolescence, every effort, every sacrifice, every late-night chore or homework session done while she partied and whined, had culminated in this single, crushing moment. But instead of exploding, I felt a strange calm, a clarity I had never experienced before. I was 18. I had independence within my reach, and I had choices. I started making calls. First, my wrestling coach, Coach Thompson, who had always treated me like more than a student athlete. His family had an extra room since their oldest son had left for college. After explaining in broad terms what had happened, they immediately welcomed me, no questions asked. "You're like a son to us anyway," his wife said. "We'd be honored to have you here." That simple statement was the most validating thing I had heard in years. Then I called my boss at the gym, where I had worked part-time since I was 16. He jumped at the chance to increase my hours to full-time, knowing I was reliable and responsible. "If you need independence, I've got opportunities for you," he said. I smiled quietly, picturing myself free from a home that had never truly valued me. Finally, I reached out to my school counselor, Mrs. Evans, who had always encouraged me academically and personally. She was appalled at how my parents had treated me. "What they did was completely inappropriate," she said. "You deserve to finish senior year with dignity. We'll figure this out together." She helped me plan how to live independently while finishing school, including enrolling me in programs that allowed flexible schedules for work and study. Over the next week, I acted normal on the surface. I went to school, worked my shifts, handled the usual household chores like nothing had changed. But underneath, I was quietly reclaiming my life. Every day, I moved a few personal items, clothes, electronics, documents, trophies over to Coach Thompson's house. I stopped reminding Dad about bills, ceased helping Mum with client paperwork, and no longer cleaned up Madison's messes. The quiet absence of my labor was the first subtle sign of the chaos to come. Saturday morning, exactly 1 week after my cancelled birthday, I executed the final step. Madison was at the mall, spending money she didn't earn. Mum was working on her client emails, and Dad had left for a site inspection. I packed the remaining belongings from my room into boxes and garbage bags. On my bed, I left a simple note with the house key. Since my presence, needs, and milestones clearly don't matter here, I've chosen to go where I am valued. Do not contact me unless you are ready to apologize sincerely and make real change. For the first time in my life, I felt an unburdened freedom. I locked the door, loaded the boxes into my old truck, and drove away from the house I had lived in for 18 years, from the family that had never truly seen me. My chest felt lighter with every mile. I was not just leaving a house, I was leaving a lifetime of unappreciated labor, invisible efforts, and emotional neglect within days. The consequences of my departure rippled through my former household. Without me, the unnoticed but crucial tasks I handled daily began slipping. Mortgage payments were missed, bills went unpaid, and Mum lost a major client due to forgotten paperwork. The cracks in Dad's construction business, previously masked by my diligence, became visible. But the biggest storm hit Madison. For the first time, she had to confront reality without her personal buffer. Her GPA, artificially maintained with my help, collapsed. Academic probation loomed as she failed assignments and skipped study sessions. Legal troubles re-emerged, drinking citations, shoplifting incidents, all previously smoothed over by me now required direct parental intervention. Dad had to hire tutors, attorneys, and deal with restitution fees, all of which added financial strain. The scope of Madison's entitlement and mismanagement became horrifyingly clear. Over the years, she had used Mum and Dad's resources unchecked, racking up tens of thousands in unauthorized spending. I had unknowingly been covering for her, masking the true extent of her exploitation. With me gone, the total financial exposure was revealed: over $35,000 in missing money, legal fees, and lost investments. My parents were scrambling to mitigate consequences they had never prepared for. Meanwhile, I thrived in my new environment. Coach Thompson's family treated me like family, not unpaid help. I had friends who valued my presence, mentors who guided me, and a space where my efforts were recognized. For the first time, I could grow without being weighed down by someone else's chaos. And from a distance, I watched the once perfect family facade unravel spectacularly. A mix of fascination and quiet vindication warming my chest. Within just a few weeks, the illusion of their perfect life began to crumble in ways that were impossible to ignore. Without me silently orchestrating the household, deadlines were missed, bills went unpaid, and the finely tuned balance that kept my parents' careers and social reputation intact collapsed. Dad's construction company, once running smoothly with my occasional reminders and help, now faltered. Project bids were miscalculated, orders for materials went wrong, and a few clients began cancelling contracts. Mum, overextended and emotionally exhausted, started losing clients in her high-end real estate business. Houses that should have sold quickly lingered on the market, and lucrative deals slipped through her fingers. But the real storm came in the form of Madison. For years, she had been untouchable, treated as the family's golden child, rewarded for tantrums and manipulations, shielded from accountability. Now, without me as the buffer, the consequences she had long avoided hit all at once. She failed 2 classes that semester, falling on academic probation. Her reliance on me for tutoring, reminders, and hands-on help for assignments left her completely unprepared. Dad scrambled to hire an expensive private tutor, $75 an hour. But Madison's entitlement clashed with the tutor's structure, and she skipped sessions, claiming she didn't vibe with the teaching style. Her legal troubles escalated to shoplifting incidents from high-end stores in Scottsdale, previously smoothed over or ignored by my quiet interventions, now demanded attention and expense from my parents. Each arrest and citation added to mounting legal fees and restitution costs. The most devastating revelations were financial. Madison had been siphoning money from Mum's purse, Dad's credit cards, and even forging signatures on checks for years. Over $35,000 in unauthorized spending funds that could have been my college savings were gone, and the family was forced to scramble to cover the gap. I watched this chaos unfold from my new apartment near ASU, silently tracking social media, community gossip, and mutual friends. Every Instagram post, every picture of exhausted parents, every neighborhood whisper confirmed that the facade of perfection had shattered. My parents' frantic calls and messages came daily, voicemails filled with pleading and guilt trips. Not once did they apologize for canceling my birthday or acknowledge the years of neglect. "Please come home, son." Dad's voice cracked over a voicemail. "Madison can't handle this without you. We don't know how to manage anymore." I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on building the life I deserved. My GPA remained high. I maintained a full-time job at the gym, trained with the wrestling team, and nurtured friendships with people who valued and respected me. For the first time, I experienced genuine appreciation, not the transactional acknowledgement I had received at home. The satisfaction of thriving while witnessing my former family's unraveling was subtle, quiet, but deeply vindicating. Months passed, and the consequences intensified. Madison's reckless spending escalated. She transferred family savings into a sketchy cryptocurrency scheme promising impossible returns. Over $45,000, the entirety of my parents' emergency funds, disappeared. She racked up personal loans and credit card debt in their names, crashed a vehicle while driving under the influence, and engaged in schemes to cover her tracks. The total financial damage exceeded $125,000, wiping out savings, ruining their credit, and pushing them to the brink of bankruptcy. The physical and emotional toll on my parents was immense. Forced into a cramped two-bedroom apartment, working multiple minimum-wage jobs to cover necessities, they faced the grim reality of rebuilding their lives from near nothing. Dad's construction business collapsed under debt and legal complications. Mum, now a retail employee, earned a fraction of her former income, her autonomy and reputation destroyed. Meanwhile, Madison, finally confronted with consequences, experienced a complete mental breakdown. At 26, she became dependent on them for basic functioning, managing bills, scheduling appointments, and even personal care. I observed from my distance, navigating a world where I was seen, valued, and celebrated. Coach Thompson's family welcomed me like one of their own, honoring my presence, asking about my day, and celebrating my achievements. Every wrestling match, academic award, and personal milestone became a quiet testament to the life I had built for myself, stark contrast to the chaos I left behind. Even the community began noticing. Neighbors who once admired my parents' perfect family now whispered about financial mismanagement, legal issues, and public incidents involving Madison. Dad lost potential clients who valued stability. Mum's real estate reputation suffered because of missed deadlines and errors that would never have happened while I maintained the household systems. Their social standing eroded as the consequences of years of enabling behavior became publicly visible, and yet, despite the devastation, I felt no glee in the conventional sense. It was the calm, almost clinical satisfaction of justice being served not by vengeance, but by the natural consequences of choices and neglect. I had built a life of respect, independence, and personal achievement, free from the toxic patterns that had defined my childhood. From my apartment, I could watch the collapse without being caught in the storm, knowing that my decision to leave was the turning point that had allowed both my growth and the exposure of truth. By the time my sophomore year rolled around at Arizona State, Madison's spiral had reached its peak. I could see it unraveling bit by bit, like a slow-motion car crash that I wasn't a part of but couldn't look away from. Her schemes became bolder, more reckless, and devastatingly consequential. She got involved with some slick-talking scammer online who promised astronomical returns on a new cryptocurrency. Madison, confident and entitled, convinced herself that she could turn a quick profit and had access to all the family's finances. Over $45,000 vanished from my parents' accounts, representing their entire emergency fund and a substantial portion of their savings meant for retirement or college. The financial chaos didn't stop there. Madison had been running up debts in secret for months, unauthorized credit cards, personal loans, even taking out a car loan in her name that she immediately crashed. The total damage she inflicted on my parents' financial security was staggering. Over $125,000 in debt and lost savings. Dad, already stretched thin from unpaid bills and missed work, was forced to declare bankruptcy. Their dream home of 15 years had to be sold, and everything they had built, professionally, socially, and financially, crumbled around them. Watching from my apartment, I felt a strange mix of relief and validation. For the first time, the consequences of their decisions, the relentless favoritism toward Madison, the way they dismissed my needs, the way they enabled her reckless behavior, were fully exposed. I didn't need to intervene. Their lives were collapsing from the very foundation of their choices. Madison herself became a shadow of the untouchable princess she once was. At 26, she was completely dependent on my parents for basic life management. She couldn't hold a job for more than a few weeks, couldn't handle finances, and struggled with even the simplest adult responsibilities. Her legal troubles compounded as she faced charges from her shoplifting incidents, unpaid restitution, and the fallout from the cryptocurrency scam. For someone who had been untouchable for years, every part of her world had collapsed. Mum and Dad, forced to confront the reality of their enabling behavior, were unrecognizable. Mum worked 7 days a week, juggling 2 jobs just to cover rent and basic expenses. Dad took on low-paying construction work for other companies, the business he had built over decades now in ruins. Their health and relationship deteriorated under the stress. After 25 years of marriage, the constant strain, financial ruin, and the burden of caring for an adult child who could not function independently pushed them to separate. Dad moved in with his brother, scraping together a fraction of his previous income, while Mum rented a tiny apartment in a less desirable part of town. Exhausted and demoralized, even socially, their reputation was shattered. The community that had once admired the Johnson family now whispered about financial mismanagement, legal issues, and Madison's antics. Neighbors who once greeted Mum and Dad with admiration now avoided them at school events or neighborhood gatherings. Dad lost potential clients. Mum's real estate career stagnated. The carefully curated image of the perfect family they had projected for decades was completely gone. Meanwhile, I was thriving. My GPA remained high, I earned recognition from professors, and I maintained leadership roles in student organizations. At the gym, my full-time work allowed me to save and invest in my future. I built genuine friendships with people who valued me, respected me, and celebrated my successes. For the first time, I existed in a world where my contributions mattered, where I wasn't invisible, and where I could focus on myself without constantly cleaning up someone else's mess. Occasionally, my parents tried to reach out, voicemails filled with desperation and guilt. They didn't apologize for canceling my 18th birthday, nor for years of neglect, but they begged me to come back, to help Madison, to fix what had fallen apart. I listened quietly, realizing that while I still cared, I wasn't responsible for their mistakes. My life had moved forward, built on my own effort and integrity. I had created a space where I was valued and supported, something they had never been able to provide. It wasn't revenge, I felt. It was clarity. The destruction of their household and Madison's failures were natural, consequences of years of poor decisions and enabling behavior. I had chosen independence, and in doing so, I had allowed the truth to unfold. The validation came not from seeing them suffer, but from knowing that I had escaped that toxic cycle, and that my life was finally my own. The breaking point came when Dad called me one night from his brother's house, voice hoarse from exhaustion. "Son, we've lost everything," he admitted. "The house, our savings, our careers, even our reputation. Madison can't function on her own. We need your guidance." I let him speak, absorbing every word. His desperation was palpable, the weight of accountability finally pressing down on him. Mum got on the line, tears streaming, apologizing endlessly. "We should have valued you. We failed you. We don't know how to fix this without you." I stayed calm. I told them that I had built a life independent of them, surrounded by people who respected and supported me. I reminded them that their treatment of me had consequences, and that I would only engage under strict conditions. Madison must take responsibility for her actions. My parents had to publicly acknowledge the mistakes they made in favoring her over me, and any relationship going forward must be based on mutual respect, not their reliance on me to fix their problems. They agreed immediately, without argument. Over the following month, I observed from my distance as they began to follow through. Madison entered intensive therapy, started working part-time at a fast food job, the first real responsibility she had undertaken in years. Mum publicly acknowledged their errors, and both parents attended family counseling to address enabling behaviors and learn healthier patterns. And through it all, I thrived. I completed my sophomore year with honors, maintained my scholarship, and continued to build a life of independence and purpose. The satisfaction I felt wasn't vindictive. It was the quiet knowledge that I had made the right choice for myself, and that finally the family dynamic had shifted in a way that reflected reality and accountability. It was a quiet Thursday evening when I realized just how far I'd come. I was sitting at my small apartment near campus, books spread across the coffee table, laptop open with spreadsheets for my part-time job, wrestling gear neatly folded in the corner. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, catching the dust particles in the air, and for the first time in my life, it felt like my world was entirely my own. No chaos, no favoritism, no constant expectation that I clean up someone else's mess. Just me, my choices, and the results of my own work. 2 years ago, I had turned 18, expecting a celebration that would honor everything I had accomplished. Instead, My parents cancelled my birthday because Madison had a tantrum over a cancelled vacation. They didn't see me, didn't value me, didn't acknowledge the countless times I had held the household together, tutoring Madison, paying bills, grocery shopping, and covering for her mistakes. At the time, it felt like a personal betrayal so deep that it could never heal. But that heartbreak had been the catalyst for my independence. Now, as I looked around my apartment, I could trace every decision, every action, every small victory that had brought me here. The GPA I had worked for, the scholarships I had earned, the trust and respect of my mentors, the genuine friendships I had built. All of it had been earned without the safety net of my family's support, and that made it all the more meaningful. For the first time, I was living in a space where my accomplishments were recognized and celebrated, not ignored or taken for granted. Meanwhile, the chaos I had quietly anticipated was unfolding back in my old home. Madison, who had once been the untouchable golden child, was now fully accountable for her choices. Intensive therapy had begun to expose the roots of her entitlement and emotional manipulation. Though progress was slow and often painful, she had a part-time job, the first real responsibility she had undertaken as an adult, and she was learning the hard truth: the world doesn't revolve around her. I followed her developments through social media and mutual friends, sometimes with a pang of pity, sometimes with quiet satisfaction. She had finally learned that actions have consequences, a lesson she had avoided for so many years. My parents, who had once prioritized Madison over me in every aspect, were now forced to confront the aftermath of their enabling. Mum's work schedule was grueling, her income a fraction of what it had been, and her confidence shaken from the repeated mistakes and missed opportunities. Dad's construction business no longer existed, replaced by low-paying jobs and financial uncertainty. The stress had even led them to separate after 25 years of marriage, a reality I had never wanted but could now observe without guilt. They were beginning to understand that their choices had consequences, and that the family dynamics they had ignored for so long had real-world costs. One evening, about 18 months after my departure, Dad called me from his brother's house. His voice was strained but sincere. "Son, we know we treated you unfairly. We know your birthday should never have been cancelled for Madison's tantrum. We've lost everything because of our mistakes. Please, we need your guidance." I listened, allowing the weight of his words to settle in. Mum joined the call, her voice trembling. "We don't deserve forgiveness, but we finally understand. You were the one who mattered, and we threw you away." I stayed calm, measured, and firm. I explained that I had built a life independent of them, surrounded by people who valued me. I set strict conditions for any relationship going forward. Madison must take responsibility for her actions. My parents must publicly acknowledge their past mistakes, and any interactions we had would be grounded in respect and accountability, not their need for me to fix their problems. They agreed immediately, without argument or negotiation. In the months that followed, I watched them follow through. Madison remained in therapy and gradually began contributing meaningfully to society. Mom issued a public acknowledgement of their mistakes, and both parents attended counseling to learn healthier family dynamics. Their compliance didn't erase the past, but it demonstrated the first signs of real change. And throughout it all, I continued to thrive, completing my business administration courses with high honors, expanding my work hours, and cultivating meaningful, supportive relationships. Looking back, I realized that the true victory wasn't in witnessing their fall from grace, was in my own ascent. I had created a life defined by choice, effort, and recognition. I had built a support system based on mutual respect rather than obligation or guilt. And I had discovered a truth that had eluded me for years. The value of a person isn't determined by the family they are born into, but by the life they choose to build for themselves. The lessons were clear. Enabling toxic behavior doesn't create loyalty or love. It fosters dependency, entitlement, and eventual collapse. Independence requires courage, self-respect, and the willingness to step away when your contributions are undervalued. And finally, justice isn't always immediate, but allowing natural consequences to unfold can be more satisfying than any act of revenge. As I sat there, studying for finals, my phone buzzed with a text from my best friend. "Dinner at your place tonight. Your apartment is way more fun than your old family's anyway." I smiled, feeling a sense of contentment I had never experienced in my childhood home. My past didn't define me. My family's mistakes didn't control me. I had built a life of my own design, where I mattered, where I was valued, and where I could finally breathe. For the first time, I realized that I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. And the satisfaction of knowing that I had done it all without their help, while they faced the consequences of their own choices, was absolute. My life had been reclaimed, and I was determined never to allow anyone else to diminish my worth again.